Welcome back, communicators. How you doing? How's everybody doing? Checking in. No matter when you're listening to this, I'm sure something is going on. I want to send a little bit of love out there, actually a lot, to communicators. And I want to make sure that no matter what you're working on, that you are taking care of yourself and that it's okay to tap out when you need to. We have a supportive conscious communicator and DEI communicator support system here at Kim Clark Communications. And if you need any support, that's what we're here for. And this podcast is an extension of that support for you personally and professionally. And today's guest is going to come at our conversation today from a digital marketing perspective, deep digital marketing experience across industries and even academia. And so I'm really excited to introduce Ben Guttmann here to Communicate Like You Give a Damn. So we typically have, corporate communicators listening, but our buddies over in marketing and brands, we have to be really, really tight with them. So sharing your expertise, Ben, with us is going to be exceptionally helpful for us to understand how marketing can work and apply to us as communicators, and especially on how we talk about and describe diversity, equity, and inclusion as a narrative for our organization. So I'm really pumped for this conversation, and even more so for your book coming out, which will be the primary focus that we'll talk about today. So Ben, welcome to Communicate Like You Give a Damn. Please introduce yourself.
Thanks for having me, Kim. It's great to be here. Appreciate the introduction. So a little bit about me. My name is Ben Guttmann. I ran a marketing agency for 10 years. Now I don't. I sold business a year and a half ago. And since then, I've been exploring a lot of different things. And one of the most exciting is my book, which just came out. It's called Simply Why Clear Messages Win and How to Design Them. I'll grab a copy of it over here. And it just came out about a week ago. Very exciting. It is the culmination of those 10 years running a marketing agency, working with all sorts of great clients. We started with a local ice cream shop and worked our way up to the NFL and Comcast and I Live New York and all these other great brands. And then the past years, inclusive of a lot of those years, I have also been an adjunct at Baruch College here in New York and been teaching marketing in the Zicklin School of Business there for a long time, which is also where I graduated. And I absolutely love that. It is my favorite thing that I do. It's the best. So what happened is that when I look at the experience that I had there and look at the experience I had in the professional setting, and then I looked at my personal experience of being a consumer, a user of the world, is everybody has the same challenge, which everybody listening here will understand, which you understand, which we had all important things to say, and we had a really hard time getting them out. And that's why you hire a marketing agency, right? And when you're thick of it, you can understand. You can not so much understand. You can know what you're doing, right? You can say, okay, this is how I'm going to run this campaign. This is how I'm going to build this brand, whatever it is. But not until I was sold the business and was able to take a step back, I was able to look more critically at that question, which drove all of those projects, which drove all the stuff I teach, which is why do some messages work and just don't? And that was the kind of research question that kicked off writing this book.
Well, you did a great job with the title, simply put. I mean, it's, whenever we can use vernacular as a book title, I think really helps. And it also makes your point of the book. And and it's really clear for who it's going to benefit. And there's so many content creators that listen to this podcast that may or may not be formally in communications, but we know content creators, they're communicating and communicators are creating messaging. So I love the title. Simply put, clear messages and how to design them. I love it.
I've been joking that I was just going to say, the old cliche is that you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. This is a book that you 100% should judge by its cover, right? If I didn't do a good job with the title, with the subtitle, with the back cover copy, with the design, working with my publisher and all that stuff, then I wouldn't be trustworthy in terms of what I was talking about. So we were, Kim and I were joking before we recorded that I loved writing this book. It was a lot of fun. I'm excited to share all the stuff in it, but I wouldn't recommend anybody writes a similar book again, because every single time that you're on a podcast or you're writing a blog or an email, you're going to be judged on the efficacy of your own work as part of that.
Can I do that to you now?
By all means, go ahead.
What's your story, Ben? Is there anything else that informs how you got to where you are today in writing the book and having the bravery of writing the book? But can you tell it in a simple message that kind of is an example of what you teach in your book?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's a little bit of what I kind of said to kick things off, right? So I would see the same problem over and over again with our clients, with anybody that I would work with, which is to get the stuff out of our head and to get it into somebody else's head is something that should be easy, feels like it should be intuitive, but it turns out that we are built to receive things one way and we're built to send things another way. And I looked at this challenge through that experience of what I've done for a decade. My background's in design. Right? That's my functional background is as a designer. And I said, okay, well, we have this problem. How would a designer approach it? And I look at it through, I identified 5 different principles that we act upon to get there. Design is, I have this conversation with a lot of junior designers. Design is not art, right? Design is, it's a problem solving activity. It's how do you arrange things in the world to achieve a goal? And we often don't think about the messaging, the communications that inherit the things that we think of as design. We think a piece of software is designed. We don't necessarily think that the messaging inside the software is designed. We think that an email, that a website is designed or a presentation is designed. We don't necessarily think about the language and messaging inside of it as being designed. So how do we extend that set of tools and attitudes and abilities into the language and into the messaging itself?
Excellent points. Excellent points. So how was the process of writing a book like this for you? And, and what kind of feedback have you gotten from folks on how they've applied what we're going to talk about in just a second, which are your 5 principles?
Oh yeah. It's a ton of fun. I mean, I know a bunch of authors because before I started my own journey on this, we worked with a number of authors in my age. We would often a lot of stuff in the health and wellness space, some self-help, some business. And I always loved that because, I mean, listen, publishing doesn't have that much money, but you work with really interesting people as part of it. And so I always enjoyed that. I was familiar with a bunch of folks. But it's one thing to be familiar with it, and it's another thing to be on the side of actually being the person who has to write it and edit it and promote it and all those things. I really like it. People, I mean, you wrote your book, and I'm curious what your opinion is. People tend to fall into 2 camps. I've noticed people who love the act of writing a book and people who hated the act of writing the book. And there's like not much middle ground, actually. I loved it. I actually really enjoyed being able to sit down and do the research and the outlining and writing the stuff. But I've also met people who that every single word felt like it was pulling teeth. What was your take on it?
Well, I'll liken that example to what Iyanla Vanzant says. There's speakers who write and there's writers who speak. My co-author is a writer who speaks, and I am a speaker who writes. So I am on the opposite side of what your experience was. I'd rather talk about it and teach, educate, rather than actually write. So, which is why I started writing, learned this about myself, because it was my first time writing a book. And then I brought in a ghostwriter. I'm like, interview me, let me talk. And then you do the writing part because that's your strength. That's, but then I made sure, and then I re-edited everything that she wrote to make sure that it was what I wanted to say, but I couldn't start from nothing, you know?
Oh, yeah.
And so at the same time, I have so much content, and the beauty of writing the book was organizing that content. Like, it's now codified.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the same thing that I've been talking about for years and years and years, it's now organized into a book with the addition of everything my co-author brought to it, which also demonstrated all the years of work that she's been doing as well. So to have this kind of documented version of what DEI communications is and all that it can be when we apply the depth model to our organizations, it's like, I'm so glad I did it, but boy, am I so glad it's done.
Oh man, there's Douglas Adams, who wrote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I just read a piece that described his hatred of deadlines and writing and stuff. This guy was the most successful writers probably of the 20th century, commercially successful, and he had to be locked in a hotel room. His editor at the publisher, the two of them got adjoining hotel rooms, and the editor babysat Douglas Adams for like 3 months while he was locked in to finish the book on deadline. And he has a quote. He has a quote which I love, which is, "I love deadlines. The whooshing sound they make as they blow past." That one, there's a part of me for sure that will never deadlines. But one thing that's also interesting about the experience I had running an agency, client services, I have a scope of work, I have a track, a deadline. There's outside parties that have to be coordinated. It really prepares you for writing a book, right? Because I looked at it and I said, okay, well, the deadline, break this up into different pieces. And first I do research, then I do outlines, and then and then I would go sit at a coffee shop and be like, okay, I'm going to go write the part today. The effect of having that process, though, where I would have the outline, pick what I wanted to write on a daily basis, led actually to an easy to write but a very difficult to read first draft, because the first draft had every little. I ended up being very repetitive in the first draft. There was a lot of things that, because I forgot I explained something a month and a half ago when I sat down and wrote that piece. I explained it again in another section later on. So the editing process was very valuable as part of the.
I agree. I and it made me more succinct on my ideas. And my co-author was excellent at that. She read through all of my stuff and said, well, you already said it here. She's the one that found that stuff. And then my ghostwriter, of course, was phenomenal at that as well. So it made me a stronger writer but it also helped me be more succinct in my ideas as a speaker as well. So the whole process, all upside, absolutely. It was just really painful to be in the middle of it, and I'm glad it's done. So people are saying, when's your next book coming out? And it's like, too soon. All right, let's talk about your book.
Yeah, this is good.
And you've got what the crux of your book is these 5 principles, and it reminds me of a quote. I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you a long one. I really, really love these 5 principles that you share with your book. So I'd love for you and just to give you a little bit more of an understanding of the kinds of communicators that are listening. Now, we've got people from governments from all over the world, not just US. We have people who are communicators within the government, publicly traded, not-for-profit, in the US, outside of the US, medium, small, large, global, national, small, solo, family-owned, all of it are people that are listening to this podcast. And so while we represent every industry, country, language, org size, all of it, we do have the challenge of simple communications in common, to your point. Like, this is something that everybody has a problem or a challenge with and wanting to do better, no matter what kind of organization it is. And dare I say, for us as interpersonal relationship people, we could be better at it as well. Have more simplified messaging just in our interpersonal and intrapersonal kind of communications as well. But with that in mind, we are also at a time as diversity, equity, and inclusion communicators, and really learning what DEI is. That's our product. That is our service, if you will, that we are trying to tell a story around that is inclusive of all of our employees and engages our leaders. And we need to tell a story, tell a narrative, and have messaging that really helps our folks understand outcomes, the benefits of DEI, and how critical they are to embed across the organization. Now, I'm not asking you to be a DEI expert. You do you, Ben, right? So you're a digital marketing expert. You are a marketing expert. And it's pretty much the same that what we're trying to do here in developing our messaging around DEI and for us to be effective marketers and communicators of DEI within the organization. So I'd love for you to walk us through what the 5 principles are. And then maybe we could play around a little bit with the process that you talk about in the book and garner some imagination and some inspiration for our audience on how they can apply it to how they're developing their DEI narratives.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll go back even a further step, actually. So there's the 2 parts in the book. There's the why and the how. The why is this first piece, and this is going to be, because what we're talking about, a lot of the listeners here are going to know this, but the essence of simplicity, I define it as a message that is easily perceived, understood, and acted upon. And what that describes is what's known as a fluent message. So fluency is a word we know, right? We can be fluent in English or wine or cooking. There's a lot of different things we can be fluent in. And it comes from the word flowing, right? Where something is fluent, something's easy. And as a cognitive scientist, what they will describe, if you ask them what fluency means, it means that, well, it's easy to take something from out in the world and stick it in your head and make sense of it. It's easier to read something, to see something, to hear something. It's easier to take any sort of stimuli and input it and take action upon it. And the summary, when you look across all the research about fluency, is that when something is easier, when it is easier for us to take from outside, put it inside, we have all sorts of positive associations, right? We like it better, we trust it more likely to buy it, all those things. And the opposite is also true, right? If we have to sweat and work to understand something and to make sense of it, well, we like it, we don't trust it, and we don't buy it. And if you're in a position like all of those different groups that you just mentioned, if you're anybody who inform or persuade as to what you're doing, that's not what you want, right? You want something that people are going to have these positive associations with. So that's the first part. The conflict is we have a lot of internal and external factors that push us towards the opposite of that. We're in charge of sending. We have an additive bias, more likely to add than subtract. We have societal pressures, which say, we can put a line on our resume for a thing we added, but we don't really put it for something we got rid of, right? We don't get our picture in the paper for maintaining a bridge or taking down a bridge. We get for putting one up. So there's internal, there's external pieces of that. So that's the gulf that we're trying to bridge when we're talking about these 5 principles. And put that design hat on again. So these are the 5 pieces I've identified. It's not step by step. It's not a checklist, but they're principles for developing a fluent message, a simple message. So the first one is beneficial. What's in it for me? What's in it for the user? What does it matter to the receiver? People don't buy features, they buy benefits. This is kind of sales 101, marketing 101. People don't buy features, they buy benefit. What does it mean to them? Number 2, focus. Are you trying to say one thing or are you trying to say multiple things at once? The word priority is singular, right? You can only focus, you only really communicate one thing at a time. Salient. The third one. Does your message stand out from the noise? When everybody is zigging or you zagging, is there enough contrast with the background? Does this rise to our attention? Does it stand out? Is something perceivable? That's salient. Empathetic is number 4. Are you speaking in a language that the audience understands? Are you meeting them where they are, both in terms of the actual words that you're using, but also where they are emotionally, what their motivations are? Are you understanding who your audience is? And then finally, the last one is minimal. And I don't really have these in a particular order, except for the first and the last one. Beneficial is important because you need to start with what's in it for the receiver. Minimal is at the end here because it's about have everything you need, but only what you need. Have you cut out everything else that's superfluous? And this doesn't mean, what's important to remember on this one, is it doesn't mean that it's the fewest number of characters or words or sentences or paragraphs. It means it's the least amount of friction. Is it as a user experience term, friction? Is it the easier is to take to make sense of, to perceive? And sometimes that means more web pages. Sometimes that means more slides. Sometimes that means more paragraphs, as long as it is easier than the alternative. So if you take these 5 and you act upon them, you're going to get to a state of fluency and you're going to develop a simple message.
I think you made a really good point in there that I loved it all. But there's one particular part where you're talking about, it's not necessarily fewer words, but there's a gut there. There's a meat there. Speaking as a vegetarian, there's a meat there that's what really resonates with people. And so when you're talking about simple messages, can you help just give us a little bit more of a definition around simple messages? Because you know what you just said, it doesn't mean necessarily, sometimes that can also mean more paragraphs, not less, but simple is still the goal here, and provide exercise or examples that you have that you share in the book.
Certainly. So I will, I'll illustrate by actually pulling it away from messaging for a second. So if you're the average American, you're consuming 13 hours a day of media, some form of messaging being hurtled at your brain, thousands and thousands of messages. There's lots of things for us to pay attention to, right? There's lots of things that are clamoring, beeping and buzzing and flashing for our attention. All of these things are there as competition. But if you give me a bit of friction, there's a bump in the road, if this has a word that I don't understand, it is a clunky paragraph or a sentence that feels a little out of place, or even your message is not visually designed in a way, it's all just a big block of text instead of there being headlines and bullet points and call to actions and those type of things. If any of those things happen, these bumps of friction, it's just an excuse for us to pull off. It's an off ramp, right? And we don't want off ramps. We want people to get to our destination. We're in the business of informing and persuading, which everybody is. We want to get people to where we want to go. If we are trying to do that, every one of those pieces is an off ramp. If you look at online shopping, we get this when dollars and cents go into it, right? If you look at online shopping, what happens when you press that button to check out? Well, you're going to go to a page, and everything on that page is going to disappear except for the buttons that allow you to progress into the goal. You're not going to have the menu to go back to another category. You're not going to have the About Us page or the Investor Relations page. You're just going to have their credit card information, enter your shipping address, press that button, and get out of there. Because designers of that interface, and every off ramp is a lost sale, and so they eliminate all the off ramps as much as they can, eliminate those pieces of friction. And the version of this that can also look at is, let me see if I can refresh myself on an example here for minimal, but something like Michael Pollan's. You talk about being vegetarians. This reminded me. That's come back to me. If you want to just be a vivid example of a minimal message versus one that's not. If you go to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and you look up what their recommendation for healthy eating is, it's follow a healthy eating pattern across a lifespan. Okay, I mean, it's wrong, right? That's the headline. Cool, I get it. But it doesn't really there's friction there. Well, what is a healthy eating pattern? What does it span on things? Michael Pollan famously, it's eat food, mostly plants, not too much. It's 3 sentences. It's longer. The words are about this, but it's longer. Is all of a sudden you get it. It's vivid. It's descriptive. It is something that is meeting me where I am. That's an example of we have the minimal in terms of the design, and the minimal in terms of messaging.
That's a great example. It also reminds me of my girlfriend has a sign in the kitchen that says, "Eat like you give a damn." And I'm like, and we're doing the podcast, communicate like you give a damn. That's really powerful. So is there a difference, Ben, between like taglines, like just do it or think different, versus simple messaging? Are the taglines an example of simple messaging that we should be looking for in finding our voice on DEI narratives, or can they look differently outside of a tagline?
So it's funny. I do mention taglines quite a bit in the book, and I have them kind of right in the front and center in some of the first pieces. But that is largely because that's an easy way in. It's an easy way to understand kind of what we're talking about. Another one that I love, by the way, they don't use it anymore. When I talk about empathy, I talk about how are people talking? What language are they using? FedEx had one of the best slogans that was an example of like how a human actually speaks, which is when it absolutely positively has to be there overnight. When it absolutely positively has to be there overnight, that's how you would say it, right? That's how, if I'm sitting there and it's 5 o'clock and the deadline's coming on, I got to get this thing to the client. This absolutely positively has to be there. That is a great example of meeting people where they are in their language, their motivation, their emotional state. But the tagline stuff, it also relates to this idea I talk about in the chapter on benefits, which is, how do we structure the different elements of a message? Because this is actually probably more, if you read into the book and all this stuff, it's probably there's a lot of stuff if you're writing emails and if you're designing websites and if you're doing pitch presentations and that type of stuff. There's a lot more meat in that, right? That's most of our communications. That's most of this, I think, will be relevant. But when I talk about benefits, by the way, my about benefits, this is what I tell my students. And I say, if you only remember one thing from this class, from this course, from this whole degree, remember a sentence. And it's from Theodore Levitt, who's a Harvard marketing professor from the 20th century. It is, people don't want to buy a 1/4-inch drill. They want a 1/4-inch hole. People don't want a 1/4-inch drill. They want a 1/4-inch hole. They don't want the thing where they want what the thing is for them. So if you start with that understanding, is that, again, it's about benefits, not features. And you start to understand, well, okay, what is the importance? What is the meaning of this feature? You ask, so what, right? And that gets you to the functional benefit. Then you can ask, so again, that gets you to the emotional benefit. An example, minty toothpaste. Okay, I'm not buying minty toothpaste because it's minty toothpaste. I'm buying minty toothpaste so that my breath is fresher. Great. Okay, at least I'm already on a better footing than having a big ad that says, here's minty toothpaste. Well, I actually don't even want fresh breath. What do I want? So what? I want to make a good impression on the date that I have, right? Okay, so all of a sudden, I'm at the next level down. I'm at that emotional level of, okay, I want to have a good date because I have fresh breath, because I got the minty toothpaste. And you can even go a level further. You can do so what again, and you can get to the famous Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You say, what need is that gonna match up to? Well, my love and belonging, right? So you somehow got from minty toothpaste by acting like a kindergartner and questions 3 times. You got yourself to that foundational level where minty toothpaste is tied into love and belonging, and then that's how you really develop a good tagline. Is how do you get to the point where you're talking about benefits, you're talking about the emotional needs behind everything, and so I think that, and I put that one front and center, because if you can get that right, everything else gets a lot easier.
Yeah, I can see that. And I love you bringing up that reminder of people want the whole, they want the result. That's the outcome, So when I'm talking to clients and on this podcast, frankly, I try to say it every chance I get. We have to be describing DEI from an outcome. What is the whole that they need? And then we can go even beyond that. So what is that whole giving us? Is that whole giving us a place where we can put the string to hang up the picture? What, and then what's the picture doing on the wall? It's reflecting to us love, family, togetherness, wonderful memories. Okay, well, well, then we're back to belonging. We're back to, community. It's like, we can go as deep as we need to find those places. And that's what our challenge, that's what I'm asking DEI communicators to do is, DEI can be the drill, but the outcomes is leading to, I need a whole right here. So what do I need to get to that whole? I need DEI to make that whole. And then that whole is going to give me what? So just doing the introspection, just pausing and thinking this through, because I thank you so much for bringing this to our audience, because it's giving them language and a framework and tools to help them identify what their unique narrative is around what are these outcomes of DEI? What is this whole? Why do I need the whole, and to what end? And allowing people just to see DEI at a deeper level and creating the language around that, because one of the things we always say on the podcast is language leads to behavior. So that's why my money is on communicators, to really turn around what's going on around the battle, honestly, around DEI narratives and what it is and what it isn't, which leads me to my next question that, we really leaned in, especially in the summer of 2020. And there was a lot of folks that put up the social posts, on the black squares and stuff. And there was very few words, and we could say that was simple messaging, but it had profound impact on the work behind that messaging. And then when we started leaning back, which is where we are now, we've left this space open for other people to fill the void and enter in catchy phrases like woke. Now, and then we're caught off guard. And employees are saying, I don't want to work at or leaders. I've heard leaders say this to communicators. We're not a woke company. We're not going to add pronouns to the emails, our corporate email template. So, because we're not woke. I don't want to work at a woke company. Now, not everyone can define what woke is. And a lot of people don't know that it's co-opted and appropriated from the Black community and now used as a pejorative. But even if it can't necessarily be defined, there are a lot of people who say it, they just know whatever it means, I don't want it, right? So how on earth did this term catch on, but all the rest of the ways that we talked about DEI did not? That's fascinating to me, to kind of like water it down into a word that doesn't even belong to the community that is often repeating the word. And so, from your work and working with clients in marketing, using language, figuring out their messages, what kind of guidance provide for communicators to help us understand this odd phenomenon and how to take it back?
That's a hard question, right? That is really tough. What happens is this is the same, it's a different, it's a different beat, but it's the same kind of song of what's happening across all of media, all of marketing, which is that everybody's, there's a war for our attention, right? Like that is the most finite resource that we have. We have plenty of food, we have plenty of water, we have plenty of shelter. We don't have that much attention. We have the same 24 hours in the day that we had before. We have even less because we're so frazzled after 13 hours of those being spent communicating messaging. So there's a whole army of practitioners on either side of the marketing equation, of the politics equation, that are going to try to to win as many of those little skirmishes for attention as you can. So it's tough. I mean, I don't have a good answer. Things just to throw out there, possible tools for it. Number one is I mentioned this when I talk about empathy in the book, which is it's a tool at the very end, which is what does your message sound like to bad intentions or somebody who won't give you the benefit of the doubt? How does it look in the worst possible light? That you just playing a little bit of preventative defense can sometimes avoid the issues which come up down the line. I don't want to wade into the relative what would be a better phrase or not, but we've seen also in the last couple of years that the defund movement has been something that the folks on the other side have twisted and said, hey, you know what? Okay, well, this means X when it really meant Y beforehand. So that's an example of kind of failing to stress test your message a little bit. I thought, again, I don't want to get into a more active one because I don't really have one, right? But you have to run that test a little bit. And I'll also leave with this other piece, which is a lot of times when we're trying to focus our message, try to just say one thing, because this is kind of what happens before we get out there. It happens in the inside a lot of times, either internally in our own heads or in our organizations, is that we want to say this and this and this and this. And if we do all those things, I call it the Frankenstein message, which actually, if you look at the book, Mary Shelley's book, how she describes the monster is not that, it's the ugliest thing on the planet. It is individually, each element was beautiful. It's got big, strong muscles, it's got lustrous hair, it's got these beautiful white eyes. And every item that Dr. Frankenstein selected for the monster was beautiful. It was selected beautiful, but when you put them together, it was a gruesome composite. It was something that was worse than the sum of its parts. And if you're not able to focus, if you're not able to get kind of to that one piece, and because you think everything else is so good it has to be there, you're only dragging everything down. We want to live in an infinite world, and in many ways sometimes we do, but attention is finite. If we're saying one thing, all of our attention is going to that. If we are trying to message 3 or 4 or 5 things at once, each one of those things comes at the cost of the attention that is given to the other things.
Very interesting. Let me kind of, I love the Frankenstein example, because it's something else that we deal with as communicators, is that we are constantly battling noise, right? So much information bombarding our employees. And so just, everyone and their brother wants to get messages out into internal channels, for example. So we have a constant challenge of finding the quality rather than the quantity. So I think the Frankenstein example is really helpful, because we have lots of singular messages, and then if we try to do too much all at once, and it ends up falling apart. I'm going to rephrase part of the question I just asked you to see if I can ask it better. When a message is simple and it meets the criteria of the 5 principles, like apparently the term woke has, because it's gotten widespread use, it sticks, it has this factor where it has taken up space, like people use it, it has stuck, right? What about that word, or let me see, I'm going to look at your principles here. So beneficial, that's interesting to see how that word fits into the principle of beneficial. Besides, I can see the benefit of that word basically shutting down conversation about DEI. It just stops it. So there's a benefit to saying that word. So if somebody's uncomfortable and wants to end the conversation, they can get out of it by saying woke. Okay, so I can see the benefit of that. It is very focused. It's one word about one topic. salient.
Well, I would argue that maybe what has happened now is that the focus is lost a little bit, right? So it's because it's harder to apply this to a single word, right? Because it's getting down to like the atomic, like quantum level of this piece. But the problem with how the powers pushing in the other direction try to define woke is that they don't define. If you there's always the funny clips from the Daily Show or TikTok, whatever, of some journalist, comedian going and asking folks at a Trump rally, like, what does woke mean? And they don't really have a description. The problem, right. So what they've managed to do, the other side, is turn woke into a boogeyman. So it's not so much that the word has the letters that form the word. What's wrong with that is that they've taken it and they've said, well, you know what? This isn't focus. It doesn't just mean what it originally. It means everything that's bad, right? Like that's how they've co-opted that phrase. And I think that they've been, for their audience, very successful in doing that, right? Like there's entire presidential candidates that are running campaigns on like the anti-woke agenda. Because what does it mean to be anti? What does it mean? Anti the things that you think are bad. Like that's what they've turned that word into. And again, I'm not a linguist or anything, but I understand that just like how a brand can get diluted, a word can get diluted as well. If you use a word, if it gets used and misused, and it'll turn to mush, and it'll turn to whatever somebody else wants to describe. Whenever I hear, I've bitten the book where I talk about, the dictionary adds a new word. The Oxford English Dictionary adds or updates a definition every 29 minutes. The dictionary isn't prescriptive, right? The dictionary is descriptive. Every word, English is a living language, just like everything else. And the forces pushing in that other direction have managed to, in many ways, and at least for audience, to redefine that word. So that is not focused. That it just means kind of the generic bad.
So it's lost its focus there. It's focused for a particular audience. When I look at empathetic and your principle around empathetic here, it's like it speaks the receiver's language and exhibits insight into the reality. So you don't even have to define what that reality is, but if you say it to a certain demographic, that is, they come up with their own picture and it works. It works for them, and obviously it's minimal. So it's interesting to look at terms that have made it, especially in the DEI space, since that's primarily what we talk about on the podcast, is narrative, messaging, words, phrases, terms that have worked, that have moved people either towards or away from DEI work, where people feel opted in, that they're a part of the work, that have opted out. It's an interesting conversation that I'm asking communicators to engage in. Like, what are the terms, the words, the messaging that has worked, that has either turned people off and on to the outcomes of DEI? Because again, we're going for the whole here. And what is the purpose of the whole? What does that give us? So I ask this question at the end of every interview, Ben, so let me know what your perspective is. But what does communicate like you give a damn mean to you? What does that look like given your 5 principles?
So the most foundational thing that if you take it away from this, I think will change a lot of people's perspectives. And actually, I don't know, maybe I probably, a lot of people listening are going to already understand this. Some people I know in business and in other realms don't understand it, which is, I break it down. It doesn't matter if you're an advocate, you're an educator, if you're a politician, if you are a marketer, you're a sender. There's the senders. That's all one bucket. I simplify that. Get everything else out of the way. And the other side, the voters, the donors, the buyers, that is, those are the receivers, right? Keep it to its core essence, senders and receivers. Just like if you're sending a letter, you have to pay the postage. The sender has to bear the literal and metaphorical cost of sending a message. It is our responsibility as someone who has something they want to say, who wants to inform, who wants to persuade, to make sure the receiver has plenty of stuff they want to do. They woke up today with a lot of things on their mind about their favorite sports teams and their political parties and the movie they want to watch later and the deadline they have crushing on for work. But they didn't wake up wanting to hear your ad. They didn't want to know every commercial you've ever seen has been against your will. Nobody has on their to-do list, I want to go click an Instagram ad. Everybody is perfectly doing what they're doing. And if we're coming in as a sender, if we're in that, that bucket, we have to have that humility to it, that it's our responsibility to make sure that we get heard. So if you can get that, then everything else is going to be easier.
Wonderful. Very practical. So everybody, want to make sure that you go out and get Simply Put, Ben's new book, and take a look at these 5 principles a little closer. And no matter who you are or how long you've been doing DEI and how long you've been talking about it, this is something to kind of go back and use as a litmus test. Because the language around DEI is ever evolving as well. So are the needs of our employees and our customers, especially as Gen Z continues to enter the workforce. The evolution is nigh, we are in it and in the midst of it all. And so our language needs to evolve to reflect and, to your earlier point, also shape how the conversation needs to go forward and meet people where they are, but also lead them towards our desired outcomes. And simple messaging that includes being beneficial, focused, salient, empathetic, and minimal are all the key principles that you will get out of the Simply Put book. I wonder if other people have done that too, but Simply Put book. So Ben, how can people find you, get the book, follow you, etc.?
Well, appropriately, if you go to simplyputbook.com, you'll find the book. And so I put URL because my last name is Guttmann, Guttmann, 2 T's and 2 N's. And it's really hard when I'm talking on a podcast to somebody go to benguttmann.com and make sure they spell it right. But go to benguttmann.com, spell it correctly, or go to simplyputbook.com. And you can find out about the book there. There's a free chapter you can download. You can buy the book anywhere books are sold, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. And there's also an email. I send an email once a week, just, pretty straightforward. I write something, I share something, I find an interesting idea, and anybody can subscribe to that. So I hope that, this book is, and the message therein is useful to a lot of people and helps make a difference. A lot of the folks that we're talking to today are doing incredible work and meaningful. And if this helps them do it a little bit better, I'll be very, very happy. So if I can help anybody of anything, or if the book made a difference, please shoot me an email. I'd love to hear about it.
Thank you, Ben. Thanks for your time. Thanks for sharing your expertise in marketing and doing some crossover work with us communicators to help us be better storytellers around our DEI narrative. Thanks for your time.
Thanks so much, Kim. I had a blast.
So what popped out to you from the conversation? The more conscious communicators in the world, the better the world. So go to communicatelikeyougiveadamnpodcast.com and set up a one-on-one strategy session. And until next time, let's keep taking care of each other.